This is not just another true crime story. This is one of the most haunting, shocking, and heartbreaking cases you will ever hear. An 18-year-old girl, full of dreams and music, vanishes on a routine work trip. Her car is found abandoned with chilling clues inside. And weeks later, her body turns up in a ditch, blindfolded. What happened to Barrett Lynn Beck is a mystery that baffled investigators for nearly 3 decades. A tale of twists, suspects, betrayal, and a resolution that will leave you stunned. This is the most gripping, tragic, and unforgettable case you'll see, and you won't believe how it ends. Barrett Lynn Beck was born on April 12, 1972, in the quiet town of Sturtevant, Wisconsin. A place where life moved slowly, and the most exciting news was usually small-town gossip. Crime was rare, and families felt safe letting their kids roam the streets until dusk. Barrett grew up in a loving home with her parents and younger brother. She was bright, friendly, and quick to make friends. Music was her greatest passion. She played violin in the school orchestra, losing herself in the melodies she created. In high school, she started dating Kurt, and their young romance carried on after graduation. By the summer of 1990, Barrett was 18 and standing at the threshold of adulthood. College was on the horizon, though she hadn't settled on a major. Only that music, in some form, would be at the center of her future. In the meantime, she took a job at a local company, determined to save money before starting school. That July, her employer signed her up for a 3-day computer training seminar in Appleton, a city several hours away. It was her first solo business trip, a milestone that made her both nervous and excited. Her parents, cautious by nature, weren't thrilled at the idea of her driving such a long distance alone. But eventually, they agreed. She was an adult now, and this was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. On the morning of July 17th, they loaded the family van, helped her pack, and waved goodbye as she headed down the road. Barrett promised to call them the moment she checked into her hotel. Hours passed. The phone never rang. As daylight faded, her parents' unease grew. The trip should have taken only a few hours, yet when they called the hotel, the clerk told them Barrett had never arrived. Frantic, they began phoning her coworkers, friends, anyone who might have seen her that day. No one had. They clung to hope. Maybe she'd changed her plans, stayed with someone she knew, or checked into a different hotel. They decided to wait until morning. But when the seminar began without her, hope turned into dread. Barrett's parents called the police, and with that call, an investigation began. One that would uncover far darker truths than anyone in Sturtevant could have imagined. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us grow. A huge thank you to everyone who's been watching. When Barrett failed to arrive at the seminar or contact her family, the police finally stepped in. But in those first crucial hours, they did little more than circulate a notice with a description of her van. She was legally an adult, and without any clear signs of foul play, investigators decided against launching a full-scale search. They would wait. That wait stretched into another day with no sign of Barrett. No phone call, no van. It wasn't until the morning of July 19th that a break came. A tip about a vehicle matching the description parked outside a supermarket in the small town of West Bend, roughly 65 miles from her home. Officers arrived quickly and confirmed the worst of their suspicions. It was the Beck family's van. The doors were locked. Barrett was nowhere in sight. Inside, the first clue came from a crumpled Walgreens receipt. It was time-stamped July 17th, the day she vanished, and traced to a store just across the street. When police spoke with the cashier, they learned Barrett had been there around noon. She was alone, cheerful, and showed no signs of distress. But the other details were far more disturbing. The van's stereo and radar detector were missing, possible evidence of a robbery. Cigarette ash was scattered across the seats and floor, an odd detail given that Barrett never smoked. There was so much of it that detectives believed someone had spent considerable time inside the vehicle. Her belongings told their own story. Almost everything she had packed for the trip remained. Her red shirt, the one she wore when she left home, was on the floor, torn at the hem. The dress she'd planned for the seminar lay nearby, along with stockings knotted tightly together. Even the shoes she'd worn that morning were still there. One detail gnawed at investigators. Before Barrett's parents handed her the van, they'd written down the mileage for her expense report. Now, the odometer showed 461 miles more than when she'd left. Given that the supermarket lot was just 65 miles from her home, someone had clearly driven the van much farther before abandoning it. 2 discarded coffee cups, one from McDonald's, the other from Burger King, added to the puzzle. It was unlikely Barrett would have made both stops in such a short trip. By now, detectives were convinced someone else had been in the van. The evidence pointed toward an abduction. A simple vehicle theft seemed implausible. Barrett had been missing for days, and there was still no trace of her. Investigators began by retracing Barrett's last known steps, determined to map out the hours before she vanished. They learned that she hadn't driven straight toward Appleton after leaving home. Instead, she made a detour to see her boyfriend, Kurt. According to Kurt, the two talked for a while about her upcoming trip, the seminar, and plans for the future, before she said goodbye and headed out. He insisted he hadn't heard from her since. Detectives found nothing linking him to her disappearance. Still, one detail caught their attention. Kurt had given Barrett a ring, a gift she reportedly never removed. When police processed the van, that ring turned up in a strange place, tucked beneath one of the floor mats. The positioning suggested it had been deliberately hidden. It was unlikely to have simply slipped from her finger and ended up there by chance. If someone else had removed it, why take the time to hide it? Especially when they'd stolen the stereo and radar detector, yet left behind this clearly valuable piece of jewelry. Meanwhile, forensic technicians scoured the van for evidence, uncovering dozens of fingerprints. Friends and family willingly provided their prints, allowing police to eliminate them from the investigation. What remained were several unidentified prints, including ones on a coffee cup, the inside of a window, and the cosmetic boxes Barrett had purchased at Walgreens. But without a suspect for comparison, these leads stalled. While police chased down every tip, Barrett's family mounted their own search. They rallied more than 100 volunteers, gave interviews to local television stations, and scoured hundreds of miles along the route she was supposed to take. They even raised a $75,000 reward for information. The weeks dragged on with no breakthrough. Then, on August 22nd, the call came. A farmer driving along a remote country road, about 18 miles from where Barrett's van had been found, spotted something in the roadside ditch. Curious, he pulled over. What he saw stopped him cold. It was a body. Authorities arrived quickly, confirming the remains were female. But the intense summer heat had taken its toll. The body was so badly decomposed that visual identification was impossible. Even so, investigators feared they already knew who it was. A comparison with dental records soon confirmed their worst suspicions. The remains belonged to Barrett Lynn Beck, The state of Barrett's remains made the medical examiner's job painfully difficult. No definitive cause of death could be determined, though strangulation was considered a strong possibility. What they did know was undeniable. This was murder. One detail chilled investigators to the core. A torn piece of fabric from Barrett's own shirt had been tied around her head, covering her eyes like a blindfold. It suggested she had been taken against her will, held captive, though likely not for long. The medical report indicated her body had been in the ditch for more than a month. That meant she was almost certainly killed on the same day she was abducted. Yet the grim discovery brought no closer answers. Weeks turned into months, and the case stubbornly refused to break open. Detectives interrogated suspects, pursued tips, and scoured for evidence, but every lead ended the same way: dead. Investigators formed a working theory. Perhaps Barrett had been the victim of a robbery that spiraled out of control. They believed that when she parked at Walgreens and went inside, someone broke into her van intending to steal valuables. If Barrett returned mid-theft, the situation could have escalated. Faced with the threat of being caught, the intruder may have decided to abduct her, ending her life later that same day before leaving her in the roadside ditch. The odometer supported this theory. After her disappearance, the van had clocked nearly 500 additional miles, far beyond the short distance from her home to the lot where it was found. It suggested the killer had driven aimlessly or traveled extensively before abandoning it. If robbery was indeed the motive, police needed to look closely at offenders with a history of vehicle-related crimes. Before long, one name stood out: Craig, a man already suspected of stealing multiple cars near the area where Barrett was last seen. Craig's methods raised eyebrows. He had a habit of using stolen vehicles to commit other crimes, often driving them for days before discarding them. The parallels to Barrett's case were hard to ignore. Digging deeper, detectives discovered that not long after Barrett vanished, Craig had been arrested for an armed bank robbery. During his arrest, police searched his belongings and found something that made their stomachs tighten: a woman's hairbrush, tangled with strands of blonde hair. But in 1990, forensic science had limits. DNA analysis was in its infancy, and without the means to compare the hair to Barrett's, the brush remained a haunting but unproven connection. Detectives soon learned that Craig had the means and opportunity to commit the crime. But opportunity alone was far from enough to prove guilt. Then came a revelation that jolted the investigation. While interviewing Craig's acquaintances, one friend dropped a bombshell. Craig had allegedly confessed to killing Barrett. According to this witness, Craig even showed him her body inside the van before disposing of it. The confession claim instantly elevated Craig to the top of the suspect list. But there was a problem, a big one. None of the fingerprints recovered from Barrett's van matched Craig's, and when confronted, he denied any involvement, leaving investigators with little more than hearsay. For months, they hunted for something, anything, that could tie him to the murder. At one point, they considered charging him based solely on his friend's testimony, hoping it would be enough for a conviction. But without physical evidence, prosecutors knew the case would collapse in court. Still, Craig remained their prime suspect. For years, his name hovered over the investigation, each new tip or lead circling back to him, yet never quite landing. The case dragged on for decades, cold but not forgotten. Everything changed in 2013, when the file was turned over to a dedicated cold case unit for a fresh look. Detectives dove into the dusty boxes of evidence, only to face an infuriating setback. Several pieces of Barrett's clothing, listed in official records, were missing. Somewhere along the line, likely through human error. These items had been discarded. Even so, the team sent the remaining evidence for modern forensic testing and ordered a fresh comparison of the fingerprints found in the van. That's when they made a startling discovery. In the 23 years since Barrett's murder, those prints had never been digitized. They existed only on paper. Once the prints were finally uploaded into the national database, the wait was short. The lead detective soon received a call from the lab. There was a match. 5 of the fingerprints belonged to a man named Dennis Brandner, a name that had never once appeared in the original investigation. A quick background check revealed he had an extensive criminal record, which explained how his prints ended up in the system. Dennis Brandner's rap sheet was long and unsettling. In his younger years, he served time for stealing cars and later faced arrest for breaking into a home. In another disturbing episode, he crept into a hotel room where a woman was staying, stole her underwear, and left behind notes laced with explicit, disturbing messages. But one incident stood out to detectives for its chilling similarity to Barrett's case. Years earlier, Dennis had broken into his ex-wife's car while she was at work. When she returned and got inside, he pulled a knife and tried to abduct her. She managed to escape and report him, but the act revealed a dangerous pattern of predatory behavior. As investigators dug deeper, they learned that at the time of Barrett's murder, Dennis was working as a long-haul truck driver in the same region. His job took him through countless towns and cities, giving him both the mobility and opportunity to commit such a crime. Still, detectives moved carefully. First, they ruled out any personal connection between Dennis and Barrett or her family that might have explained his fingerprints in her van. But one detail was impossible to ignore. One of those prints was found on a box of cosmetics Barrett had purchased just minutes before she disappeared. That placed Dennis in her van at a critical moment, dramatically increasing suspicions. Detectives decided it was time to confront him. At his home, Dennis denied knowing Barrett and insisted he had nothing to do with her death. But when told his fingerprints had been found in her van, his composure cracked. He grew visibly nervous, at times breaking into tears, though he still clung to his claim of innocence. Investigators pressed on. Interviews with people from Dennis's past uncovered a series of unsettling coincidences. His ex-wife revealed that Dennis had always favored Burger King, visiting it often. Barrett, on the other hand, preferred McDonald's. Inside her van, detectives had found coffee cups from both chains, one of which, from Burger King, bore Dennis's fingerprint. Then came an even stranger lead. Former co-workers from a factory job Dennis held after Barrett's murder recalled that he kept a photograph of a young blonde woman in his toolbox. After so many years, it was impossible to confirm the woman's identity, but the resemblance to Barrett was strong enough to leave investigators deeply unsettled. One former co-worker of Dennis shared a chilling memory. She said he once told her outright that he wanted to kidnap and assault her. Meanwhile, police were still gathering evidence when a breakthrough came from the crime lab. Despite the earlier loss of some of Barrett's belongings, several items from her van had survived in storage, including a cigarette pack wrapper. Using modern forensic technology, analysts discovered a fingerprint on it. It matched Dennis. Compiling the case against him took nearly a year. Then, in March 2015, Dennis Brandner was arrested and charged with the murder of Barrett Lynn Beck. But almost immediately, prosecutors faced a major hurdle. While Dennis's fingerprints were inside Barrett's van, they feared this alone might not secure a conviction. By 2015, juries had come to see DNA as the gold standard in criminal trials. Fingerprints, while damning, did not place him at the scene of the killing in the same way, and left room for doubt. It was entirely possible, the defense could argue, that Dennis had been inside the van under unrelated circumstances, and despite exhaustive forensic work, investigators had found no DNA tying him directly to Barrett, her belongings, or her vehicle. Still, the case moved forward. The trial began in the summer of 2016. From the start, Dennis's defense attorney attacked the prosecution's case, hammering the lack of DNA evidence and insisting that fingerprints alone were not proof of murder. The strategy worked. Jurors were divided. Without a unanimous verdict, the trial ended in a mistrial. The setback was crushing for Barrett's family. After 26 years of not knowing what had happened to her, they now faced the possibility that the man police believed had killed her might never be held accountable. But prosecutors weren't ready to give up. They immediately announced plans for a retrial, scheduled for early 2018. This time, they built their case on the theory that Dennis had attacked Barrett with the intent to sexually assault her before killing her. But proving intent beyond a reasonable doubt would be an uphill battle. The outcome of the retrial and the severity of any sentence depended on it. If the jury rejected their case, Dennis could never be tried for the murder again. He would walk free. After long consultations with Barrett's family, prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Dennis a plea deal: plead guilty to second-degree manslaughter in exchange for avoiding another uncertain trial. The plea deal ensured Dennis Brandner would serve time behind bars, though far less than Barrett's family had hoped. In exchange for pleading guilty to second-degree manslaughter, he received the maximum sentence allowed: 10 years. With credit for the time he'd already spent in jail since his arrest, his total term was effectively reduced to 7 years. He would walk out of prison at age 71. For Barrett's parents, the punishment felt painfully light, but they understood the grim reality. Without the plea, there was a very real chance Dennis could be acquitted and never face justice at all. Reluctantly, they agreed to the deal, believing it was their only path to some measure of closure after nearly 3 decades of uncertainty. In the years that followed, they found a way to honor their daughter's memory. They established a scholarship at her high school, awarded for excellence in music, a fitting tribute to Barrett's passion. The scholarship continues to this day, keeping her name and love for music alive for future generations. There was also one final development in the case's long history. Decades after Barrett's murder, investigators finally discredited the damning statement that had made Craig, the original prime suspect, seem so suspicious. One of Craig's acquaintances had claimed Craig showed him Barrett's body in her van, but the truth was far less dramatic and far more infuriating. The man had fabricated the story entirely, driven by a personal grudge, and had pieced together his account from details he'd overheard from police. His false accusation had cast a shadow over Craig for years. It had taken 28 years, countless false leads, and 2 prime suspects before Barrett Lynn Beck's case was officially closed. For her family, the resolution was bittersweet, justice of a sort, but never enough to fill the void left behind. Be sure to let us know what you think of the story in the comments below. And if you like this video, smash the like button and don't forget to subscribe. A playlist is going to pop up right now with more videos you'll love. See you guys next time.